Testing, testing. All right, Java 1, fall semester 2015. Yes, we're working on chapter 5 now and looking at our program assignment, Prog 5 assignment, which is on page 197, and it's number exercise 5.17. An on-line retailer sells 5 products whose retail prices are as follows. Product 1, constant value, $2.98. Product 2, $4.50, and so on. Write an application. That means that your program will have the main method in it that reads a series of pairs of numbers as follows. So input from the keyboard is going to be the product number and the quantity sold. Your program should use a switch statement to determine the retail price for each product. It should calculate and display the total retail value of all products sold in a final report, and use a sentinel control loop to determine when the program should stop looping and display the final results. So with those directions, we can begin to sketch our logic for the program. I'm going to need a total variable, and that's going to be a double, and we're going to initialize that to 0. I'm going to need a product ID number 1 through 5 for my products in my inventory, and they'll be an integer declared data type. And I need quantity, and we're buying or purchasing integer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 2.5. So our quantities are going to be of type integer. We will have the main method, begin and end. We're going to want to prompt the user to enter the product number, and we'll probably want to do a good job of prompting the user because we do have some restrictions. The product number has to be between 1 and 5 or a sentinel value, and I used 0 to stop. Once we prompt the user and get their valid input via the keyboard, we'll assign product ID. Now we'll ask the user for the product number flag until the value is entered. So while product ID is not equal to 0, remember your not equal relational operator, that's your exclamation point and the equal sign, and they are right together. There's no space in between. Not equal. Also, when we're working with a while, we think about we have to have the condition of the while primed when we first move into the while. So we're first coming into the while, and the variable or variables of the condition have to have their current values assigned. And we did. We have already prompted the user. We have assigned a product ID. So product ID should be either 1 through 5 or 0. If the first time through the user does type 0 to stop, then the while will check product ID. It's equal to 0. 0 is not equal to 0. 0 is equal to 0. So that would cause a false test, and we would exit the while without even processing it once. That's the ideal logic of the while. However, it's more likely that our user is going to type a product ID 1 through 5. So while product ID is 1 through 5, but not equal to the sentinel value, we're going to process. Now moving into the while loop, if product ID is greater than or equal to 1, and remember your new and operators means that both conditions must be true for the expression to return true. So product ID is greater than or equal to 1, and product ID is less than or equal to 5. Well, those are our legitimate product inventory numbers. So we'd want to be error trapping that we are processing product ID within our legitimate product code inventory control. Now, if that's true, let's just assume that it's not. If this is false, then here's our our if begin. Here's the body of the if, and here's our closing if brace, and here's an else if. So if our if statement is false, we're going to go to the else portion and test if product ID is not equal to 0. Well, if product ID is not within our inventory control range 1 through 5, and it's not equal to 0, then our user typed something outside of our legitimate range. So we're going to print product must be between 1 and 5. So your product ID inventory numbers have to be between 1 and 5, or 0 to stop execution. Those are our valid input range of numbers. And then we would go to reassign the product ID. Prompt the user once again to type a valid product ID number between 1 and 5, or of course our sentinel value 0 to stop. And that would be reassigning your product ID. We'd go back to the top of the while again. So back at the top of the while, we have a valid ID number 1 through 5. If product ID is greater than or equal to 1 and product ID is less than or equal to 5, it is. Prompt the user for a quantity amount sold for that product ID. Assign an integer value to the quantity purchased. And then we're moving into a switch situation. So we're using the switch. Remember the switch, we select one of many on a match. So we have an integer product ID. Our product ID numbers are 1 through 5. So I can match my product ID on case 1, case 2, case 3, 4, or 5, depending on the product ID number that the user typed in. So our switch statement, switch, and here's our end switch. We're going to design our switch cases then, case 1 with a colon. If product ID is 1, we'll process the body of the case. If product ID is 2, we'll match on that case and process the body of the case. And of course, you could continue to design case 3 and case 4 and case 5, and then we'll end our switch. So we're processing our first product ID. Let's say the user has sold a quantity of 1. Product ID is 1. We're going to match on case 1. Total is going to be incremented from its previous value. At this point, it was 0 to quantity, which is 1, times the price for product ID 1, 2.98. And then we break out of the case and go to the statement immediately following the switch, the end switch, which is our we are out of the switch. We are out of the if. That was our true test for the if. So we'll move to reassigning for the next product ID. The user types in the next product ID number 1 through 5 or the sentinel value 0 to stop. Again, within a while, we always have to reassign the variable or variables of the condition of the while, and we are doing so. We're reassigning product ID with a new ID number entered by the user. We'll go back to the top of the while, and perhaps the user typed in 2. So while 2 is not equal to 0, we're going to go back and process a valid product ID. prompt the user for the quantity for that ID sold, assign that quantity, and then based on the switch statement, we're going to match the product ID on case 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Process, we're out of the true path of the if statement, and we'll go back and reassign a new product ID until the user types 0 to stop. Product ID would be equal to 0. We go back to the top of the while, and the while test product ID is now 0. 0 is not equal to 0. 0 is 0, so that causes our false test. And we're ready to begin to print the report summary. And all we're asked to do is print a well-formatted and neat report that identifies the total retail value of all products sold. And we'll want to have some formatting string. We're talking about dollars and cents, so we'll want our 2 places following the decimal point. You want to quote your $sign and leave enough spaces for a large amount of inventory sold. That ends the main, and that ends our class sales. So looking at code, of course, pay attention to your beginning documentation. I do great on that. We are expecting to have input via the keyboard from the user, so we'll want to import our java.util.scanner. Our class is public class sales. Remember, that's an uppercase S and also an uppercase S for the name of your file, name.java. Class begin, we're going to start at the main method, public static void main, open brace. We're going to prompt for input from the user. We're declaring total as a double and assigning it a 0 value. We're declaring product ID to be of integer data type. Let's see, determine the product chosen. Prompt the user to enter the product number 1 through 5 or 0 to stop. We're going to assign product ID, then that value entered by the user. While product ID is not equal to 0, we're entering our while statement. We're entering an if where we have many statements within the true path of the if, and a single statement within the else path of this if. If product ID is greater than 1 and product ID is greater than or equal to 1 and product ID is less than or equal to 5. Okay, greater than or equal to, that's our minimum product ID number, and less than or equal to 5 in this example has to be a high-end product ID number. We're going to prompt the user for the quantity sold of our product ID, whatever the current product is. The inventory or the quantity will be assigned the input from the keyboard as an integer. We're going to test on switch with respect to the product ID, and our product ID again is a legitimate integer 1 through 5. So we begin our switch with the brace. The switch selects one of many cases determined on the case match on the product ID. Product ID is an integer, could be 1 through 5, so depending on which value the user typed, we're going to match product ID on that case. So if product ID was 3, we'll match case 3 to product ID 3. we're going to increment the total inventory dollars amount sold by total plus equals the current value of total is going to be incremented by quantity times 9.98, the value of product ID 1. We break out of that case. And move to the end of the switch. We're at the false portion of the if, which is only executed if the if statement is tested false. So we're at ready to begin our output for our simple report. System.out.print, enter product number 1 through 0 to stop, or return to the while. So here we have prompting to reassign the variable of the while. Product ID is equal to whatever the user inputs. Valid ID numbers for our inventory control, or 0 as a sentinel value to stop. We return to the beginning of the while and process again, testing the new reassigned value of product ID. If product ID happens to be 0 that the user typed in, then 0 is not equal to 0 is false. 0 is equal to 0, which will exit the while driver, and we'll be ready to print our report. Some spacings involved with the print line. System.f print formatted. Total retail value of all products sold is with a colon. I have a space and then a $sign. And we're going to print a formatted double to 2 places following the decimal point with a new line, and our variable is total. And I just typed that in because it scrolled to a 3rd page. We're at the end of main and now the end of our class sales. My example could have been better documented internally, so I guess I would expect that you would do a little better job of documenting internally. End class, end main, end if, end switch, those kinds of things. And of course, document the purpose of your statements within. All right, we are at midterm, so thank you very much. We're moving along nicely with class materials. So I wanted to show you at D12. We're looking at our lesson 5. And for this program, I have some suggested output. That way we're all on the same path as evidence that we were able to execute. And certainly go ahead and experiment with entering invalid data at input prompts and see what happens to your program. And we have a little bit of error trapping built into the program, so it's comfortable for you to go ahead and double check, print different values as input at the keyboard, and then give me a valid printout with your screenshot. Just a reminder, there is a discussion open. The discussion forum, Eliza, a PC therapist, so don't forget to contribute to that discussion forum. All right, thank you very much.